So, Harmy, wrapped things up here at Lord's. England have won comfortably, as we expected, pretty much from the moment that they won the toss. It was always going to be a battle for West Indies to compete. And for all the feelings of emotion that surrounds Jimmy Anderson walking away, we've just seen a brilliant interview on Sky, Nasser Hussain in the dressing room. One of the questions he asked Jimmy about where he sat on the occasion of his first ever Test match, and you would have been in that dressing room with him, which we can talk about in a while. But aside from that, the emotion is of sadness from a contest that never got going, and real fear that this series is not going to get any more competitive, although you'd feel it would be more difficult to get less competitive. And the feeling is, how can we stop this happening? How can world cricket stop such one-sided cricket? And you see one-sided cricket all the time. We grew up watching one-sided cricket between these two nations, if you could call West Indies a nation. The blackwash that took place in England, it was one-sided then, but the other way. Okay, and maybe it's cyclical, but it doesn't feel like that, does it? It doesn't feel like the game is in a state to bring the West Indies anywhere near the heights from what we saw in the 80s. I don't know about your feelings, but I felt quite a lot of sadness over the last couple of 2.5 days. Didn't even go 2.5 days.
No, I've been, I think, quite a lot of negative emotion, disappointment, sadness, and worry for where West Indies cricket's going, Test match cricket's going. If you remember back a few months ago, John, we did a brilliant interview with Joel Garner at the Oval, and he said, and this is something that stuck with me all the time, and he said, in them sort of 80s and 90s, when we were 70s and 80s, when we were the best team in the world, we went all around the world and helping everybody out. We helped everybody out. We did world cricket. We helped everybody out. We came over to county cricket. We made county cricket stronger. We made international cricket strong because the likes of the bowling attack was unbelievable. Viv Richards, Gordon Greenwich, Desmond Haynes, you name it, they had it. They were the best team, arguably, that's ever played the game. Some will argue Australia with Shane Warne. And I think it's about time. And he said it's about time West Indies cricket gets helped out if you want to be considered as a top Test nation. And I think that stuck with me, and he's right. And I think where West Indies go in a Test match form, I'm not sure. I can't sit here and criticise these lads. I can't. I really can't. It's not fair. It really isn't fair that to sit here and criticise what has been a one-sided affair. It's gone just over 2 days. This is the best the West Indies has got. So I ain't going to criticise them for 3 games. It's not the individuals.
It's the system.
It's the system. The system of international cricket is possibly broken, and they go one or two ways. The money goes in, helps Test cricket out, and preserves what is, for me, the best format of the game. Or it goes the other way, like that's been spoken about here at this great building over the course of this last 2 weeks with some of the great players. Our very own Mark Nicholas, president of the MCC, held a conference. And out of that conference, there was a lot of talk and rumours of, in three to 5 years' time, we'll have 6 Test-playing nations, and that will be it. Now, that there was an advert for 6 Test-playing nations, and one of them's not going to be the West Indies, which is really, really scary, really frightening. South Africa might not be one. So that's the landscape of where Test match cricket is going, unless there's an influx of financial resources, where I don't see where it comes from, to make sure that Test cricket is the pinnacle. And it's slowly but surely dying. And if that's sort of put into the sort of evidence tray and says this is why it's dying, some will argue it needs to get there quickly, because that 3 to 5 years, if there is going to be only 6 Test playing nations, it needs to happen sooner, because that's a non-event.
What kind of bowler, or what kind of opportunities would Jimmy Anderson have been and had if he had grown up in Barbados or St Kitts or Antigua? The fact that England makes so much money out of cricket that the ECB could essentially stop him playing white ball cricket for England, and make sure that financially he didn't miss out. Yeah. It's a complete opposite from what we've seen. Jimmy Anderson is a Test match specialist, right? And he's played more games of first-class cricket than the majority of any of the 11 that have played today will ever play. Take Craig Brathwaite out of there. It's so far removed. It's almost like professionals against amateurs.
That's what it is.
And
it's
unless
like that as well.
Exactly. And there's been criticism about the West Indies for going too into their shells, and it just makes me laugh because the criticism before was that they didn't show enough defensive nous or technique, or that they didn't bring the defensive mentality to the game. Now it's gone the other way. Essentially, Jimmy Anderson, when he took that 7 for Lancashire against Nottinghamshire, he had his work cut out more in that county game than he did in this Test match. And surely that cannot continue, because if it does, then people aren't going to come to Test cricket. Why would you spend all that money to come and watch Test cricket when you're essentially watching a below par competition?
And that was the worry of the crowd for this week. And yeah, you'd be worried for the crowd for Trent Bridge, for Edgbaston, because what you had here, you had first day of the greatest cricketer that's ever played cricket for England, his last Test match, so that was always going to be well populated in the first day. The second day was Red for Ruth, and that's always a big day in the English cricket calendar. And obviously today people have come out because Anderson's finale, that's it, gone. But watching these 2 and a bit days, you fear for, and let's be fair, we're sugarcoating this, and it's doom and gloom on a day which we should be celebrating Jimmy Anderson. But Sri Lanka is going to be exactly the same. But this is where, put that aside, I want England to be ruthless. They've been ruthless in selection, and they need them to be ruthless. But the worry from that is, if they are ruthless and they do go and win 6 Test matches, they could easily win 4 of them by an innings.
We'll talk about England in a second. I'm just watching Phil Tufnell walk around the boundary, and he's getting a big round of applause from the fans, and he's doing a bit of back and forth, and he's enjoying the moment. Are we going to see that in 10, 20 years? And I'm not talking about West Indies, I'm talking about Test.
Tuffers still going to be alive in 10, 20 years.
Tuffers will still be with us. But it's the characters. Is the game still creating these characters? Is it still got the relationship with the viewers? Because Phil Tufnell, came through, he played for an underperforming England team for a long time, but because of the love for Test cricket in this country, he made a name for himself that still, he's probably more famous as a broadcaster than he is he's probably spent more time as a broadcaster than he did as a professional cricketer. But this is that Phil Tufnell wouldn't have the relationship with the fans here at Lord's if Phil Tufnell would only come through the ranks playing 2 teams, right? If it was a complete non-event every time he took to the field against some of the countries, and this is the problem. And it was one that was raised in the build-up to this Test match. Johnny Grave, the CEO of Cricket West Indies, said, look, when West Indies came out to England in 2020 during the COVID summer, played behind locked doors, and were essentially, they bailed out English cricket. Johnny Grave at the time said, look, this just goes to prove that the ECB, they can't play themselves. You need competition. If there's a vested interest from the ECB, from the BCCI, from Cricket Australia, to have worthwhile opponents. When West Indies go to Australia, when they go to India, when they come to England, when South Africa do, when Pakistan do, when New Zealand do, when Sri Lanka do, it is a vested interest for everybody connected to the game that there is competition on the field. Surely the Brains Trust need to be able to get together and work out a way, because the game has never had more money,
And I think that's what this meeting's been about earlier this week with the greats of the game, talking about where cricket's going. The landscape of what franchise cricket looks like, what white ball cricket in the 50-over format. Do we need that? Where does Test match cricket stand? You talked about the 6 teams. They need to get there quickly. And that's the biggest thing. So it is going to be just the big 3 and added 3 others that are wanting to play Test match cricket, or is more importantly, I would love to think that the big 3 would put their hands up and go, right, we need to make sure that every single time we play a Test match is competition. So the money that's in the white ball game needs to filter into the red ball game, and it goes into the global game to make sure that when we go to the Caribbean, we're playing against the best players. We're not playing against, no disrespect to these lads, they're club cricketers. A lot of them are, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the lads that are playing for the West Indies in Test match cricket would be playing Premier League cricket on a Saturday afternoon. That's it. They wouldn't be playing. Some of these guys wouldn't get a game in first class cricket in England. Never mind the second team game potentially in Premier League cricket. That's where the system is broken at this moment in time when it comes to Test match cricket. Sri Lanka are going to be the same. You look at South Africa, the players that they've got, they're playing a handful of Test matches. New Zealand are at a sliding doors moment. We're going there in November. So I think it is very, very difficult now to look where a positive outcome for international Test match cricket could be for maybe 4 of the 10 Test playing nations, and to see the West Indies in the state they're in now is really. I mean, it's heartbreaking because, like you said, we some of the greats of the game, the best players that's ever played the game, have come from the West Indies, and they've come from making their name in Test match cricket. What we've just seen there, and what we're going to see in the next 2 Test matches. It needs to get its act into gear, and it comes from the big 3, because that's where the money's coming from, and they have to buy into it. Because if they don't, and they're selfish, then all of a sudden, like Johnny Graves has said, and he's right by saying, the big 3 can't play each other all day, every day to keep Test match cricket going. They need to make sure that there's competition across the board, and if they don't, then Test cricket's dead, and we might as well just pack it up.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.